So I guess Philippe has done a pretty good job on the introduction, and he has talked about Eclipse and the Eclipse Foundation. I don't have to reiterate again. One important thing that I would like to mention is the Eclipse Foundation was founded in 2004 because IBM got to the conclusion that if they continue to run the governance and the directions of the Eclipse project by themselves, they will not be able to really create a joint venture, let's say, of the entire software industry, because that's what they really wanted. They wanted to provide the Eclipse project and not just provide, but also invite others to collaborate on the Eclipse project. Many times, even I started at Eclipse at 2006, and even then many times we heard the people saying, oh yeah, it's nice, but on the other hand, it's just IBM. And we had a hard time to convince them that no, the Eclipse Foundation is an independent governance body, an independent steward of the Eclipse project. And it was actually founded to create a level playing field for other players to join. So the governance explicitly said that everybody has the same rights, everybody has the same obligations. And of course, there was, depending on the funding level, how much money they basically were willing to provide to the Eclipse Foundation. They had different rights and obligations. For example, we have this group of so-called strategic members that provide most of the seats on our board of directors, which governs the Eclipse Foundation and which tells us, the team that works for the Eclipse Foundation, what to do. In 2007, I was invited to a company called Airbus. Most of you will know them. They build airplanes and other things. And I thought, oh well, it's another meeting with another company that wants to learn about open source. But I was really wrong with that, because what really happened is they told me, no, Mr. Mueller, it's not like that. We actually know about open source. And we have studied Eclipse very well. We are actually using Eclipse to build tools and other things. They were mostly around model-driven development. And they told us, we studied it. And we would actually like to use the pattern that the Eclipse Foundation has founded, so have a very well-defined governance process, have bylaws, have a team that actually works for you, for us in that case. And we would like to create a smaller subgroup within the Eclipse Foundation that on one hand follows the same type of regulations, and on the other hand can redefine certain things to the needs of that group that they wanted to build. So the group was really around their tooling for development of software in the aeroplane. And we first thought, yeah, well, whatever. So we didn't really understand the opportunity that they brought to us. However, after many discussions with them, we actually learned more, we discussed more, and we came to the conclusion, wow, that's an interesting proposition. On one hand, they want to work like an Eclipse project or many Eclipse projects. On the other hand, they want to have a governance body on top of it that pretty much follows the same type of rules. On the other hand, adopt them to the needs of their particular group. For example, they were working with safety critical environments, so they needed certain qualifications for their tools, and there was many things that they would like to adapt, but other things that they would really like to change in our bylaws. So we discussed it in the team for quite some time. We had many conversations, as I said before, and it got to a point where we basically asked them, okay, why don't you guys go ahead and write down a document where you describe what it is you want, what you want to achieve, what is your vision, because we do have a vision statement at the Eclipse Foundation. What is it that you need in addition to what we already have? So, for example, they needed their own infrastructure to achieve certain tasks. And how do you decide within this new group, in this industry collaboration group, on what it is you target, how does your funding model look like, and what are the related artifacts that you want to create, and how do they have to be managed, stored, advertised, and so on. So it ended up that we decided all together that we would found one of the first working groups. The name given was Polashes, and still is Polashes, where they could actually follow their own rules and regulations, work under the umbrella of the Eclipse Foundation, which explicitly has an antitrust or antitrust compliance regulation, and where they would go and just do whatever it is they have to do, supported by the Eclipse Foundation team. So this was the first time where we were able to set up a group that needs its own marketing, that needs its own IT infrastructure, that needs adaptations to our rules. For example, they wanted to provide certain artifacts under different licenses than the Eclipse public license. We rolled it all up, and in 2011, if I remember right, we founded the Polashes working group. What we learned over time, that this was a pattern that was not just right for the aerospace collaboration under the egide of Airbus and later on Ericsson and Thales and a bunch of other companies that were subscribing to model-driven development. But it was also interesting to other industry organizations. But we also found that, given the case that Airbus presented to us, they looked like a type of organization that didn't want to develop software by themselves, but they wanted to have third parties. We sometimes call it an ecosystem, to develop the software for them. So we call this by now a
Ralph, we cannot hear you anymore. Can you hear us? Mute. Yeah. Yes, Ralph, we lost you. Yeah. Okay, but we can you have been disconnected from the call. Yeah, maybe try to reconnect. Thanks.
Hello.
Ralph, is it you?
Yes.
Okay, so share your screen again.
I have to go through all this. Oh my God.
You're pretty good. Wow. Works.
So at what point in time did you guys lose me?
When you were talking about the fact they wanted to have their own marketing, their own IT infrastructure.
Okay.
So you were finishing this introduction.
So different types, user-driven. Some organizations come together. They want to basically ask third parties and even pay third parties to do whatever it is they have to do for them. So build tools, build a platform, build an API, whatever. We call them user-driven, and they come together and consume Eclipse services like in IT infrastructure, IP infrastructure, and people, marketing capabilities, and so on to get their business done. And then there's a problem in my slide here. It reads consumer-driven. It should actually say producer-driven. So the second type of working groups that we were asked to build was these producer-driven ones. Here, an industry comes together, or a group within an industry, let's say IoT or location tech, we will get later to that, where these folks say, okay, we are 15 companies or 20 companies or whatever number, and we would like together create and invest into an industry platform that we hope helps us to create our business or participate in more in our business and do things like that. A good example for that is IoT, our Internet of Things working group, and another one is location tech that we have right now. So with these different types, of course, the governance models were even spreading out even more over the place. And of course, we have different funding models. Funding models is quite interesting. So how do you steer as a consumer of software? How do you steer a group of suppliers to do the right things for you in open source? This was unheard of. We were actually trailblazers in this respect. It had never happened before that it worked in such a nice and governed way. And we had, especially I'm working in this user-driven environment, so we learned a lot in the last 5 or 6 years. What happens here is that nowadays in many of these working groups, our so-called user members or driver members, as they are sometimes called, depending on the governance and charter that they have created for them, they pay money into a cash box, if you want so, and they ask us to write out or do a call for quotations amongst the members, amongst the producing members, and then they decide eventually who should be awarded with the contract based on various factors, like the meritocratic factor. Has this company proven to be a good provider of services? Of course, also on cost factors, and of course also on their standing in the community. So that has been developed over time. We made a couple of mistakes in the beginning, but by now we are actually quite competent to provide the right models to them, the right governance model, or discuss the right governance models with them. And especially in the industry that we are all concerned about in the AppStack, with the AppStacker project, so the telecom and automotive industries. Within these groups, this pattern is more and more breaking in. So let's go over to the actual working groups. This is probably the coolest working group, I would almost say, that we have, the science working group. They solve problems that I'm not even aware that they exist. So they are really, really good. I cannot talk a lot about the content, but mostly what it is it helps them to achieve their scientific research. So Eclipse is widespread in the science community, wider spread than we actually thought. And in the beginning, it was just one guy, Philippe, who had the idea of getting together and sharing results. Philippe has just recently open sourced under this umbrella his Chem Eclipse project, but there's many other things that are coming to our place, including control center software for electron accelerators and the latest one was actually a tool that should help people that work on new types of computers to build their own applications there. If you are interested, just check out science.eclipse.org. You will find a lot of very interesting and cool projects. The second one, location tech. It's unfortunate we were hoping to get my colleague, or Philippe and my colleague, Mark Vleumans from the Netherlands to talk a little about it, but he had an appointment today. I'm not sure how this will play also in our obstacle world, but I think there will be touch points, and maybe in a later meeting or a later presentation, not this week, but later, we might be able to invite Mark to give us an overview about the things that they do in location tech. So this is all about geospatial data and how to deal with them. IoT, we have a presentation coming up. Philippe Benezit by our colleague Benjamin.
Yes, this afternoon, yes.
So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on IoT working group because Benjamin is way more capable than I am to talk about all the good things happening. In a couple of words, what they are really trying to do here, all these members together, to build an industrial platform for IoT. Right now, I see many of these artifacts and many of these projects being used not just in IoT, but we have another research project here in Germany that deals with Industry 4.0 platform, where quite a few of these projects are actually already used and considered building platforms for machine collaboration on the shop floor and also connectivity to the IoT cloud or to the Industry 4.0 cloud, building ontologies where people can describe their artifacts. And that might also be interesting to us or working on smart home. Polashes, as I mentioned, was the first one. It started really out in the aerospace industry, but it attracted quite a few members that were not related to this industry, mostly Ericsson, or mainly Ericsson, who has helped to fund and guide another tool like called Capella, which is a systems engineering tool, into this working group. And then they all these tools are sort of layered or formatted. They are located around the famous or infamous V model. So the idea is to provide a complete tool chain that allows open source development along the V model. OpenPath is one of our youngest children, let's say, and they have just released their first code drop. Here the idea is that folks from BMW, Daimler, and Volkswagen got together to take a different approach to testing autonomous vehicles, mostly before they were ever produced, so pretty much simulating how an autonomous vehicle would behave in certain scenarios, mostly accident scenarios. So the idea here is to virtualize the test driving put a autonomous vehicle either with existing software and hardware or just in full simulation, but eventually also in hill tests, into these scenarios and understand what would happen and how would these cars actually behave. So there's a fully blown simulation system around that, and that might be an interesting artifact to also use or consider in our obstacle project. One of the most interesting, at least from my perspective, projects or working groups that we have deals with data measurement. So the folks from your side that are related to the automotive industry, you may know that measured data, so data that they collect during tests of engines, materials, gasoline consumption, and whatnot. Acoustics are very, very interesting, not just because they have to be provided to the regulators and they have to be stored pretty much forever, but also they become more and more an asset for these industries to evaluate and do regression tests and do big data analysis on how things change when you change stuff. So besides from fulfilling regulatory requirements, that's where it comes from, they are now starting more and more to leave the physical world of acoustics or physics or materials and extend the so-called ASA-ODS or OpenMDM artifacts and APIs to also collect information from electronics and software artifacts. So while this is not quite ready for use, I think, and I've talked to Jörg Tesma in Germany about that, it might actually be very, very interesting to consider this particular working group for use in the obstacle project to just collect information and see how we are doing. It might also be very fruitful for this OpenMDM project to see how we work with it in obstacle. And that will fulfill one of the promises that we made to our funding agencies, that we would love to bring artifacts that are existing in the open source world into the obstacle project and give them feedback on the usability and also, of course, on our side, save time and energy to do things. And this is the short overview I wanted to give. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Ralph. Any question, guys? Folks?
Oh no, come on, at least one question. Okay. So thank you very much. I hope it was a little interesting. If you want to talk more about it, feel free to contact me or Philippe, or maybe in one of the next meetings we can sit together and talk a little more about it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you tomorrow. Bye now. Okay, guys. So that's it for this morning. So we will have a break for the lunch.